Hello, this is Digital Accessibility, the people behind the progress. I'm Joe Walensky, the creator and host of this series. And as an accessibility professional myself, I find it very interesting as to how others have found their way into this profession. So let's meet one of those people right now and hear about their journey. All right, well, welcome. And I have the pleasure today of talking with Sheri Byrne-Haber. Hello, Sheri, how are you?
Hey, Joe. I'm doing really well, thanks.
I'm so glad to have you in this conversation. We've met in person before, but it's good to have a chance to talk to you in this online format. Where are you talking to us from?
I live at the top of Table Mountain, which is the post office calls it Cupertino, but if you asked anybody who worked at Apple, they wouldn't know that we existed. Just outside of Silicon Valley, on the mountain that makes Silicon Valley a valley.
And has that been a place that you've been for a long time?
I've been here for since 1993 was when I moved back here from Canada. So I'm originally from the province of New Brunswick in northeastern Canada, the main side of Canada.
I've always wanted to visit that area, just tour around and check out some of the natural beauty of that area.
It's a great place in the summer. It's the lobster capital of the world. So hopefully you're not kosher or allergic to shellfish, because that would just be sad.
well, I want to kind of cover different parts of, where you got to where you're at today. But why don't we kind of start at that today part? What are you involved in right now?
So I've got my fingers in a number of different pies right now. I am an accessibility architect at Vmware. I've been with Vmware for going on 3 years now. I founded the accessibility program, and then it grew big enough that one person couldn't run it anymore. So I had to choose which piece of the baby I wanted. I could either run the remediation programs and have all the people reporting to me, or I could go into innovation and outreach, was what they were calling it at the time, and be a senior individual contributor at the architect level. And I had just won the Pitchathon, which was an internal contest. And my idea was to build better accessibility testing tools using machine learning. And I was really excited about that concept because accessibility testing is notoriously bad for automation. And I thought that I could make a difference. And so I decided to pick the architect side of things. We rolled out our tool, which is called Crest, about 2 months ago. And we're looking at, so when we started a year ago, it was about a 30-70 split. So 30% of accessibility could be tested in an automated manner, but 70% is manual. We've got it to 34-66 in our proof of concept. So we took 5 things that could not be tested could not be tested in an automated manner previously, and we automated them with a very high level of reliability using machine learning. And we think we can get that to 50-50 in the next 12 months. And it's open source, so just go to GitHub and look for VMware Crest, and you'll be able to find it.
Well, yeah, and that's something I'll definitely put a link into in the notes associated with this. And I know you're involved with a lot of other things right now as well, and we can come around to that. But I was thinking now maybe kind of push back into the past, and I think we all have different reasons and situations that have brought us into the accessibility area. But where did you start with your career, and how did it sort of move to where you're at today?
So definitely been a long and windy path. I am a wheelchair user. I have a congenital orthopedic issue, and people just automatically assume when they see me in my wheelchair and they hear me talking about accessibility that, oh yeah, that's your connection. I didn't actually get into accessibility because of that. I got into accessibility because my middle daughter is deaf. And I happened to have a computer science degree and was a lawyer at the time that we discovered that she had a progressive form of hearing loss. And so I went into advocacy for the deaf at first, suing insurance companies and school districts for refusing to cover things that deaf children need to be successful. And won a class action lawsuit against Blue Cross, kind of put myself out of business. Once you win against Blue Cross, everybody just basically gives in. They realize that there's no point in continuing to fight. And I thought, well, let me see. I've got this computer science degree. I've got this law degree. What can I do with this? And that was just about the time that accessibility was really starting to take off. So that was about 9 years ago. And I've been doing that solid ever since.
Yeah, just to stop there for a minute. I mean, you have this situation with your child. It's certainly that's a motivator. It is kind of a much bigger step for a lot of people to take it to the point where you're going into legal battles and being an upfront advocate. Was that just something you were always comfortable with, or did it all kind of stem from this and you realized it was just something that you had an affinity to be able to take things that way?
So anybody under the age of probably, let's say 35, 36, doesn't remember life before the Americans with Disabilities Act. I do. I was the eighth grader who didn't get to go on the graduation trip because Yosemite wasn't accessible and they couldn't take a wheelchair on the school bus. I was the kid who couldn't take a British literature class because it was upstairs and I was at a high school with no elevator. So my parents always did a really good job advocating for me. There was no lowered expectations. It was always expected that I would go to college. It was always expected that I was going to do everything that everybody else did. And so I think I got a lot of it from them. But, I had the good fortune. My family moved here from Canada when I was 8. And, I was the first Girl Scout to get a badge in computer science. So, I've always been around computers. I've always been around tech. I went to the Steve Wozniak taught me how to solder in the computer club that we belonged to together many years ago. So it's always been great for me to have an activity where, despite my disabilities, I could still be on an equal playing field with everybody else. And that's what tech means to me.
And then, so was it that you're was your career moving along? Like, in what areas was that going on at the same time that you were focused on getting equitable service for your child?
Yeah, so for the first 10 years after I went to Cal, I did primarily just generic software testing. Taking apart the vacuum cleaner and figuring out how it works, that was the kind of kid I was. And so I bring that with me into accessibility, because I think to a certain extent, accessibility is just a specialized form of QA. I mean, we all have our reasons for being in it, but at an abstract level, it's regulatory compliance. It's not that much different from, security or privacy or any of the other laws that you have to test and make sure that you're compliant with. Yes, you want it to be usable. Yes, there's a really good reason, that you don't want to exclude people with disabilities. But a lot of the principles that we've learned over the years in QA, like trying to shift the bug discovery earlier in the process, that also works very well for accessibility. And so that's something that I've really been focused on the last couple of years at Vmware, as we've made this massive migration from doing monolithic, large software releases, maybe 2 or 3 a year, like one major and a couple of minors, to releasing, sometimes a couple of hundred times a week.
And where was the point where the technical part of your career started to move into actively being involved in accessibility as part of that career?
Yeah, so I did software testing. Then I decided to go to law school. It was my last year of law school that we discovered that my daughter had a progressive hearing loss. So I did advocacy for the deaf for about 8 years, and then went into accessibility after that. So I'm kind of on my third career at this point, but I'm planning on sticking around in this one for a while.
Well, it was interesting the way that you mentioned about kind of the world before uh, uh, the ADA legislation that initially changed things so dramatically, but then it was still a long time before uh, digital products and services became supported by legal issues and so on. I imagine that was something that that may have affected your daughter's ability to consume things, and possibly your own as well.
That is true. So the ADA is going to be 31 in a couple of months. And 15 years ago was when the Target case was decided. So that was the first big accessibility case that actually went through to a written court decision. So yeah, it took about 15 years before the first digital accessibility case was decided. And in their infinite wisdom, the government decided not to adopt WCAG 2.0 into the Americans with Disabilities Act. So the Americans with Disabilities Act is actually written to be a very open, updatable document. The internet didn't exist when the ADA was passed. Yet courts have decided that the ADA does apply to technology, does apply to the internet, isn't necessarily limited just to places and stores that people go to. And this has been really important during the pandemic because, think about the situation of somebody who's blind. You're bubbling at your house. You're not supposed to be interacting with other people. If you go to a store, you need help. You can't read the soup can signs or, see which bananas are green and which bananas aren't. So you want to go and order online, but if it's not accessible, you can't do that either. So people with disabilities really have struggled during the pandemic from that perspective. And 97.4% of the web is still inaccessible to them. It's a really depressingly high figure.
Well, and you've lived that with yourself and your daughter, but having such where you have a kind of a long view so far of how things have progressed. To me, I kind of interested in knowing, like, how far do you feel we've really come? Because now you're actively involved in accessibility. I think to some extent we have a greater awareness of it in professional circles and in the technical areas. But sometimes I started to get involved in it around 1998, 1999, doing some work with the W3C when they were first coming out with the Web Accessibility Initiative. And in some ways, I feel like there's been like really dramatically interesting, valuable things. And then on a day-to-day basis, sometimes I get frustrated and I'm like, it never seems like we're really moving the needle that much. So I'm interested in kind of how your perceptions of that evolution.
I kind of feel the same way sometimes. There are days where you feel like you're smacking your head against the brick wall and stuff never moves as quickly as you want it to. I think one thing I find over and over is that we as a society tend to be somewhat ethically challenged in that technology always evolves faster than the ethics behind using that technology. And I think until we solve that root problem, things like accessibility are always going to be playing catch up because the technology just moves so quickly and the standards and the ethics behind how to use it don't keep up. We have AI, right? Are we using our AI in an ethical manner? Are we making sure that people of color and women and people with disabilities, that there's no bias in the coding, that there's no bias in the data sets? Heck no. We see that all the time, but that doesn't stop us from moving on to the next evolution of AI. So, sometimes the regulations take care of that, sometimes they don't. But the nice thing about the ADA is you don't have to go back to Congress to get it to change. The ADA was written so that when new things are adopted through the technical access manuals, they automatically get incorporated to the law into the law. So it is an easier process to update it. So things today like hotel swimming pools and movie theater accessibility, which was really never contemplated when the ADA was originally passed 30 years ago, those are now part of it.
Well, I mean, you're actively involved in accessibility on a regular basis and have for many years now. You've had the opportunity to work at some fairly large organizations and be involved in accessibility. Are there any things you can talk about with respect to your experiences there and kind of how that moved your career forward?
So I think I've determined over the years that the number one factor in determining whether or not an accessibility program is going to be successful is the presence of an employee resource group dedicated to disability. When you don't have that, it's a much bigger struggle. And people think of those two things and they're like, well, wow, how are those connected? No matter how big your accessibility program is, you're never going to have an accessibility person in the room all the time when the decisions are being made. But if you have enough employees with disabilities in the room and they're willing to talk about it because they feel psychologically safe to discuss their hidden disabilities or to discuss a relative with a disability or a child with a disability, then the right decisions get made because it's being discussed even when a member of the accessibility team isn't in the room. So that was something that I was really happy to be able to start at Vmware. And we just held a psychological safety event yesterday. It was our kickoff to Pride Month. So we did it in conjunction between the Women's Employee Resource Group, the Pride Employee Resource Group, and the Disability Employee Resource Group, and we had 600 people attend.
Wow, yeah, that's really amazing. And so, how do what type of if we look at your current situation, VMware, kind of what's the overall corporate philosophy around supporting accessibility? Both internally for your employees as well as the things that you're doing with the products and services that you produce.
So VMware has always been committed to making sure that people with disabilities can use our products. We tend to grow by acquisition, which has presented a sort of a unique challenge in that we've acquired, I think, 18 companies in the 3 years that I've worked for VMware. So that means you're getting, every few months you're getting handed a whole new suite of products, and maybe they're accessible and maybe they're not. But we've gone from 92 products to 140 products in the 3 years that I've been there. So that's been an interesting challenge. We just recently passed an equal internal accessibility policy. So our employee-facing policy is now identical to our customer-facing policy. And we're going through our tools and, prioritizing the ones that everybody uses first. And many of our vendors who may be listening to this call going, oh, yeah, we know Sheri, because I meet with several of them frequently to get them on the right path to accessibility. And it's one of the great things about working for VMware because we believe in using our leverage, to create a better environment for everybody. So we're not asking Slack or Atlassian or any of the companies that we work it with to fix it just for us. We're trying to get them to fix it for everybody, and we're willing to help them on our dime, the VMware, dime, to do that.
And you work in VMware is such a large organization. Probably so many different departments and so many projects going on at any given time. How are things organized to support accessibility? Is there sort of a central group that assists with supporting that, or are individual departments, do they have their own people that become advocates in those areas?
So if you look at any of the 6 accessibility maturity models that exist out there in the world, you can never get past the middle tier, without having a centralized accessibility system and a centralized accessibility budget. When you allow each business unit or each department or each product to handle accessibility differently, that's where you get into inconsistencies. And that's where you get into, okay, this department is financially challenged, so they're just going to do the minimum to get by on accessibility, where that department, maybe the department head has a child with a disability, and so he's really committed to doing it right, or she's really committed to doing it right. So the whole mindset behind the way we do it at VMware is it is centralized. There is one approach. Because we have so many products, what we've found as we are remediating products, we're getting into a situation where you transition from one VMware product to another VMware product, and maybe things don't work exactly the same way. Like, they're both accessible, but they're accessible in different ways. So let me give you an example. W3C is not particularly prescriptive in the Wcag guidelines. So if you've got a slide carousel that moves around, W3C doesn't say you have to have a button. It says you have to have a mechanism. And maybe one business unit wants to do it with green buttons in the lower left corner, and another business unit wants to do it with a toggle in the upper right. Okay, well, yeah, both are compliant, but that's not the best user experience, because the user doesn't care when they transition from one product to the next product. They just want it to work. So we realized that, and when we got to a certain level in our accessibility maturity, we said, okay, wait, we want to create an accessibility style guide so that all the product teams are drawing from the same design patterns and the same resources, so that they're all implementing magnification in the same manner, and slide carousels in the same manner, and motion and haptics and all that. So that's something we're actually putting quite a bit of effort into right now.
And then for the individual practitioners, let's say a product manager or an interaction designer or a developer, how are they able to acquire the skills or know what part they play in that overall accessibility plan that you mentioned that might be set by the centralized authority?
So many opportunities. So we have training programs that the Employee Resource Group has deployed on our centralized training platform. We have a deep dive on accessibility that's role-based. So we have a program manager course, a content manager course, a developer course, a QA course, so that everybody only has to learn what they need to know in order to do their particular job. We have webinars, we have a champions program, we have Slack channels, we have office hours, we have every communications, we have accessibility week, the first week in every February, which is the beginning of VMware's fiscal year, where we do an accessibility summit, and we talk to customers, and we do accessibility research, and we've got an accessibility hackathon scheduled for this November coming up, because WCAG 2.2 should be coming out this fall, and we want to get a head start on that. So we're all going to do the WCAG 2.2 updates together, so that we can kind of crowdsource the opportunities and make sure it's done consistently across the product.
Well, there apparently must definitely be a support from the top levels of the organization, because obviously there's a significant commitment of resources for people, to set up those activities and then give people the time to be able to embrace them and get involved and do that training.
Yeah, we have had a little bit of turnover in our upper levels. Originally, our big product champion was Rajiv Ramaswamy, and he unfortunately left to go to a competitor in February. But his role was taken over by Raghu. And then when Pat left, Raghu became our CEO. So we definitely have an accessibility champion with respect to our CEO. I get a lot of support from HR. We're working on new reasonable accommodations processes, for example. And obviously the DEI team is a big part of what the accessibility resource group is able to accomplish as well.
Well, just talking a little bit more about the things you're doing right now, and you're always visible in the various communities, writing things to share about your ideas about accessibility, and you've also been working on a new book. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so I was named the UX Collective Medium Author of the Year last year. And early this year, the UX Collective came to me and said, we want to publish a book on Global Accessibility Awareness Day. So will you write it with us? Well, I love writing. And I like to think that that's one of my takeaways from law school is I'm actually a decent, but probably more importantly, a fast writer. It only usually takes me an hour to 90 minutes for one of my blog articles. And I hate logistics. I'm terrible at, and I can't draw a straight line with a ruler. So graphics are not my thing. And they had font designers and graphic designers, and they're like, oh yeah, we're going to make this into an audiobook. And they had all that stuff locked down. So it was just absolutely a fabulous partnership. And so that came out on Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And the full book is almost finished. And I'm talking to a couple of different publishers right now. But we had 27,000 downloads in the first 10 days that the book was out. It's just been crazy popular beyond my wildest dreams. When I was writing it, I'm like, is anybody but my dad going to read this? And it turns out, yeah, a lot of people besides my dad are going to read it.
Were there any parts of it that, obviously you made the whole thing happen, but were there any parts that you are particularly passionate about as you put it together?
I think my thing right now is giving people who are just getting started the tools that they can turn back and take to their organizations who are maybe recalcitrant or don't even know what accessibility is or kind of locked into some of the myths around accessibility, and giving them the knowledge that they need that does not come from accessibility boot camps on how to change the mindset. I'm all about changing hearts and minds. If you want to read a book on how to implement ARIA, there's plenty of material out there already on that. I try to stick to the more abstract stuff. And, I tell people if I have to answer a question twice, I usually start an article on it because I figure, okay, if I write an article on it, then I can just point people to the article in the future.
Well, I haven't had a chance to get into the book yet, but I'm looking forward to reading it. And I want to thank you for just taking this time to chat with me and let people know a little bit about your story and what accessibility is all about from the perspective of Sheri Byrne-Haber.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. And I just want to remind your audience that if you are interested in accessibility, there are all kinds of volunteer opportunities. So I work with the W3C on the Silver, which is the WCAG 3.0, which will be coming kind of towards the end of 2023 or maybe the beginning of 2024. There's always volunteer opportunities there. There's volunteer opportunities with IAAP, with Lighthouse for the Blind, with Centers for Independent Living. I recently worked on the Palo Alto Junior Museum and Zoo rebuild. So the place that I couldn't visit when I was a kid is now going to be fully accessible, and I'm really excited to try that out in a couple of weekends. And just look for places that you can help, because accessibility does not require a college degree. All it requires is some knowledge and a whole lot of caring.
Well, a lot of what we do are little steps, iterative pieces, and hopefully, we just keep moving forward.
That's how I ended the book. It's just keep moving that accessibility needle forward. Backwards is not an acceptable direction.
Well, thanks again, Sheri, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully at a physical event sometime soon.
That would be fabulous.